Thank you, Karen, for that presentation. I found it really interesting to hear about your sort of story, as well as the real issues facing small businesses in America and possibly what progress can be made in the next few years. I just wanted to open with a couple questions from myself before we'll move into a wider audience Q&A. I realized that there are a lot of people in the audience who are very, very interested in asking Karen some really exciting questions. So I'm not going to keep my portion of the interview too long, so try to keep it brief. So I just wanted to kick off with a question about the origins of your advocacy for small business and entrepreneurship in general. Where did it begin? So you mentioned that before your time as the administrator of the SBA, you worked in venture capital. What sort of motivated you to take that path, and where did it all come from?
You and I were talking before about the fact that I have a sort of a family reason to be interested in small businesses. All of my grandparents were immigrants, came from Russia and from Hungary, and they started two different kinds of businesses. My grandfather from Russia was a little tough guy, and he started a textile business in the back of a shop because he was doing babies' shoes, and he didn't like the babies, you know, going to the bathroom on him, peeing on him. So he just said, I'm going to start a machine in the back of the shop, and he made socks and stockings. For World War I, he made socks, and then he made hosiery afterwards, and started a textile business. And my other family, side of the family, was in the paper box business. And they were supplying boxes to a candy company. And the immigrant who had the candy company eventually couldn't pay the bill, so gave shares of stock. And we now have a family candy company that we've had for, now it's about 100 years. And my son, who is in it, is the 5th generation. And the candy is called Tootsie Rolls. I hope some of you have tried them. Tootsie Rolls, Tootsie Pops, Junior Mints. So we eventually sold the candy. We had two businesses. We fortunately thought to sell the textile business back in before textiles went overseas, and keep the candy business. So we were in a very sweet business. But growing up, just watching my family, you know, the offices were outside the factory door. I thought that this was the American dream. And the conversation around the table was about, you know, how many machines are running, and, you know, did we sell any candy today? And that kind of ability to do that and to, you know, be your own boss is, I think, a great enricher. And a great set of opportunities, and it creates a whole stable middle class for many developing countries. So there's a lot of benefits to making sure this segment of the economy flourishes.
Right, yeah. And while doing research on yourself and your sort of story, I noticed that you have and continue to have very strong ties to Cambridge. But in fact, the other Cambridge, so Cambridge, Massachusetts. So I just had a sort of careers-minded question in that, what would you like to see graduates from this Cambridge, Massachusetts, indeed universities across the world, what would you like to see them do? And is there sort of, do you rally against the prevailing wisdom of trying to pursue jobs at Goldman Sachs or other big bulge brackets or consultancy practices? What would you like to see graduates do?
I'm teaching now at Harvard Business School, and the students are a bit older because they've gone to college, then they've worked for a number of years, so they're 29 and 30, and they have this same question. all the time. Because, going out on your own or going to a small growing business is a lot of risk. But what I've seen over the last 10 years is a big shift to many, many more people choosing an entrepreneurial path. They may not start a company, they may join a company. And now almost a third of the class does that instead of Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley. I don't think it's a bad idea to go there as a sort of training route. So I wouldn't tell you, no, don't go, because life is really long, and you're going to have a chance to have a number of careers. And there's a great benefit to visiting and learning on this. I know Jeffrey, who's here, was at Bain. Many of you have thought about these training grounds, and they are not they're not bad. You see the world, you see dozens of businesses, but I do think in the end you should have, you should think about aspirationally growing something yourself. Because the leadership in this world is going to come from people who create opportunity. And it doesn't have to be, Google. It doesn't have to be a for-profit company. But having the kind of education you have, if you are so inclined, creating an entity that somehow makes the world a better place, that creates products and services, I think is a really productive line. So go get trained to figure out how to do it. Cambridge trains you very well, but not necessarily in business. So you might need the sort of training number 2, and then come to Harvard Business School, and then go out and start a company. That's my plan for all of you.
Nice. In doing the research for this interview, I also came across your advocacy for clusters. Clusters in the sense of sort of Silicon Valley. Indeed, you touched on the Cambridge Tech sort of science park that we've got going here. So I just wanted to hear more about that and why you're such a strong fan of clusters within your research and your publications, and what you think we should be doing as a sort of society or on a policy front to try to encourage more clusters to sort of pop up or spring up around the world or within the UK specifically.
Well, I'd love to talk about that. In fact, I'll tell you a story about that. My husband and I had 3 kids. We were living in New York City. I was a venture capitalist. He was a lawyer. Everything was great, except one day he comes home and he says, I think they're going to offer me the opportunity to become president of a college in Maine. I don't know if you know where Maine is, but it's north and cold and far away from everything. And I said, Very true. Very true, right? And I said, great, when are we going? So we moved to Maine, and actually what I said is, do you want to do this? And he said, I would love to do this. So I said, okay. We left New York City, we dragged our kids up to Maine, and I reverse commuted. We had just raised a fund in New York, so I reverse commuted for 5 years. Finally, I'm done with that, and the governor called, it's a very small state, and said, I need your help, Karen. The Naval Air Station in my town, Brunswick, Maine, had just been put on the closure list for bases. And that meant we were going to lose 3,000 jobs, which was pretty much half the jobs in the town. And he said, I want you to do something about this. I said, what am I supposed to do? He said, you're a venture capitalist, create some jobs. So I had no experience in public policy, no idea what he was talking about, but I decided, well, I better do something. And I fell into this ability to conversation with Mike Porter, who does all the work on clusters, and went to Washington, was able to get a grant to make a cluster of the main boat builders and the Composite Technology Center at the Research University at the University of Maine. And we created this whole cluster where we were going to make lighter, faster composite boats. Maine has a 400-year history of making boats, and it worked. And we actually still have on the base, which is closed in that town, composite companies. And I got so excited about this ability to take a rural state and, you know, a declining state that had lost its textile business and its paper mills and create new jobs from technology and from kind of old school boat builders, that I wrote a paper on clusters that was Brookings put out. And it got noticed. I was asked, did I want to come to Washington and work on the transition team of President Obama? I said, yes. I'm down there working. They said, are you interested in the job? I said, what job? Head of the SBA. I said, oh yeah, I'm definitely interested. I'm unemployed, which I was. And they said, okay, well, you have to have an interview. I said, okay, who am I going to interview with? And they said, the president-elect. I said, okay, who else is going to be in the room? And they said, nobody. So I went to Chicago and I had a 40-minute chat with President Obama, and we got along and he gave me the job. So clusters is really the reason why I ended up at the SBA. And then, of course, I'm at the SBA, and now I've written a paper on how there should be a national cluster program, so I actually made a national cluster program. And you can see it in Cambridge. Cambridge is an innovation cluster. So that was at the beginning of this idea that you would build innovation ecosystems and create the next set of jobs.
Yeah, pretty cool. I thought the story of your work in Maine on the cluster there was really cool. So yeah, big fan over here.